Hey everybody, this is Javier. I have one of my guests today, Miss Shakar. Miss Shakar has been working in technology for the last 10 years. She is also somebody from California. I know this is a Texas based podcast, but I brought her on the show anyway because she was making a pitch to congressmen and congresswomen about science and technology. Miss Shakar, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me today, Javier. It's such a pleasure, and it's my first podcast, so thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So you and was it with others or was it just yourself?
Um, with like meeting the congressman?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, absolutely. So the way I met the Congress people, and I was scheduled to also meet the senator, was through this organization called IEEE. It's the largest organization in the world for science and technology. And we were about actually 20 representatives from California. But then we were segregated into groups to meet specific representatives, specific congressmen. So the 20 of us together met, were scheduled to meet the two senators. So we ended up meeting their representatives instead of them. And then we were in smaller groups, like maybe 4 to 5 people. In my group, I had around 5 people who met the congressmen. So I ended up meeting around 8 representatives total. So it was exciting.
So when y'all were all there, you were pitching science and technology. What was it about that you were pitching that was so important that they were hearing out what y'all had to say?
Absolutely. So basically, there were three things. All right. The first one was about, in general, getting more funding for science and technology in the fiscal year 2025. So this traces back to the CHIPS Act that was passed in 2018. We just felt like overall the resources needed and the training needed to further the state of technology and science in America needed more funding. So that was one. The second one was around create this act called the Keep STEM Talent Act, which basically advances the immigration system for the immigrants who come here for science and technology. So we're saying that there is a need to make immigration easier, to probably provide more green cards and citizenship to these immigrants versus more temporary visas. And the third one was really around like the Create AI Act, where the goal is to make AI available for smaller organizations. Right now, AI is more available to larger organizations, but then there are so many smaller research organizations and just startups who are making like big impact to the state of economy and just the quality of life of people in America, but then they don't have access to the AI as much as the bigger organizations do have. So this act is supposed to kind of benefit that. So overall, I think these three topics seem to be really important for majority of the representatives. And first of all, it was kind of interesting to see that some of them were already supporting these acts. And secondly, the ones who were kind of not directly supporting the acts, they talked about a few things that made it seem like they were really interested, and they were making notes to make sure that they let the congressmen and the senators know about AIEEE's specific interest in advancing these acts, and also my own personal interest too.
So you mentioned AI. That's one of the topics that just rang a
Yes,
bell in my head.
sure.
Why is it so important? Like, what is it that AI is doing that causes us to think the worst, even though it's not the worst? I don't feel that where the world's truly going to end because of AI. What is it that makes people go crazy over this?
Sure. Well, I would say that AI in general, I know it's a topic that's kind of that has raised some questions and some eyebrows. And I think the main reason is because there is not a formalized structure around the use of AI. The overall governance and regulation around the use of AI is not that sophisticated at this point, right? And I understand that's why a lot of people look at like how AI could be detrimental, and that's true because we're like just learning. AI is in its baby phase, right? Like it's probably like not even reached its adolescence um, in its overall maturity. So There will be hiccups. I'm not saying there will be no hiccups, but overall, AI is leading to a lot of advancement. Like I would say at this point, in this moment, the benefits of using AI are way more than the overall like risks involved with using AI. Just to name like probably one of them, right? So I do healthcare consulting and I've been doing that for a decade now. And I can tell you that ever since I started using some even basic AI features like ChatGPT, I feel like some of the research work that I needed to do before has gotten much easier. So I'm using less time to do that research. For an example, if I want to understand, let's say like a particular therapy area, right? Let's say I want to learn more about Alzheimer's disease, and I want to do a project in that disease. I go to ChatGPT and I ask, hey, ChatGPT, like, could you please tell me a little bit about Alzheimer's, its history, what is in the market right now? And ChatGPT, for the most part, is able to help me with that. And I'm just talking about basic use, like that probably even students and kids in school can be doing. With that basic understanding, I'm able to quickly jump onto more sophisticated stuff. And there is AI that helps build even like presentations. So it just takes away the burden of doing more um, basic things from me, and I'm able to use my mental power in actually problem solving, actually thinking about the real problems and what the solutions could be. I'm not having to worry too much about doing the research and making the presentations now. So I think it just is one small example. There are so many more examples of how AI is helping, like predicting even COVID. For an example, I know there are certain apps or certain like softwares that can even predict if a person might be at the risk of having respiratory disease. So all the pandemics that are out there right now, right? You could be actually preventing those pandemics if people have access to apps that could tell them if they're at a risk of developing a particular respiratory disease. So, I mean, it's insane. The overall spectrum of applications is, I would say, is completely mind blowing.
And also, why is it so important that we give smaller companies access to AI?
Well, it's because a lot of innovation lies in those smaller organizations. If you see smaller research facilities, right? They're probably taking all the burden of doing a lot of groundbreaking research. Especially, let's talk about some of the digital kind of small startups these days. Let's say digital even health, right? You'd see that through the power of technology, there's just so much streamlining that can be done within the healthcare systems, right? Patients uh, can get like access to surveys that will help them do some screening diagnosis. Then physicians are able to get access to the patient records really quickly. They don't have to wait. Like we're saving that can save lives. So I would say that such organizations sometimes don't have access to AI. Number one, AI is expensive. It's not cheap. Yes, the basic apps like ChatGPT are cheap. But if you're looking for more sophisticated AI softwares, it's not cheap. It's expensive. Second, the amount of like scale that's needed to use AI right now, like to its fullest potential, it's huge. And these smaller companies, they don't have so much infrastructure. So it's so important that, there is some kind of funding and there is some kind of a mid ground available for these organizations to use that power of AI, to use that power of artificial intelligence, especially to run some of their models that could be like more accurate.
Okay. And then one of my other questions that I have for you, and it's kind of a touchy subject, but why is there so many foreigners in the world of technology here in the United States when here in the United States we have a lot of people who think they're capable of doing the jobs that we have foreigners coming here and doing?
Absolutely. I think that's such a great point. And first of all, I really want to acknowledge what you just said. I think I have met a lot of people who are citizens here. And just for clarity, I'm not a citizen, I'm an immigrant myself right now. And I have met people who come with such ideas and who have, honestly, I have learned a lot from people. Like I've had managers, I've had direct reportees who I felt like were tremendously good. And I've seen this for over the last 10 years, because even when I was in India, I always had a team in America. And the team had citizens and people who grew up here. That's number one. Number two, now the question is valid, then why are so many foreigners coming here, right? I think one of the biggest reason is just how some of the foreign cultures are. So for an example, I can talk about myself. I grew up in the Asian continent, India, right? And I think in general in India, there's just a culture of having a huge emphasis on science and technology as education. So what ends up happening is a lot of Indians, they just in general are pursuing science since they are small kids. And they end up wanting to be in places where there is more opportunities around science and technology, where they can, kind of explore and where they can be around smarter people. And then we look at America. And it's true that I think America just in general offers a lot more opportunities, right? And we get to meet the smartest people from here, from all across the globe, because there are so many immigrants in general here. So that motivates a lot of Asians to study here, to get educated here, because the education for STEM is pretty like, top notch. And then second, once they study here, they build the relationships. And through that, they're able to get the jobs here. And also, I think just the basic interest and inclination and passion, I think makes foreigners acceptable, because I don't think there are many of the foreigners in STEM who are not passionate. Like in America, if there is somebody who's doing STEM, they are definitely passionate about it. They're probably working really long hours, or they would be willing to do that for their passion. And that's what I think keeps them around. And for the people who are not that interested, you're right. I think they'd probably not be a really good fit here, because there are already a lot of people who are extremely smart here already.
Well, I mean, you have to be passionate to come to the United States to accept these jobs. Like you
True.
have to want to do these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about not just like you said, it's wanting to do these things, but also the kind of impact that they're able to make. Like for an example, if I'm passionate about science and technology, but the overall work that I'm doing is not that impactful, again, I'm going to fall behind, right? So I personally think it's like a combination of passion, like appreciating what America has to offer in terms of science and technology, and then also like being able to rightfully put an impact out like that. That kind of benefits the economy here, benefits the people here, and all across the world.
And one of the things is, what are some of the issues that you have since where you've come to the United States that a lot of foreigners don't actually know? They don't know until they're here, until it's too late, until they're staring right at it.
That's so true. And I think the biggest one is really the social and the cultural aspect of it, right? So I personally grew up in a really small town in India. And in no way I'm trying to say that, we don't have the culture at all here. There's a lot of like, there's a lot of like Indian communities that I'm a part of. I get to go to the Indian temples here. There's a lot of like good stuff, Indian food, Indian people, Indian like festivals. But then still, the kind of culture that I came from in India, right? The kind of community I came from, the language that I was speaking with the people around me, I think it kind of isn't exactly the same. And I think that's probably the biggest one for me. And there is this element of like, I would say social isolation sometimes, where, we're just so used to being around certain kind of people. And then we move for work, and we're great in terms of like being around colleagues, but when it comes to the personal relationships and the aspects of like being comfortable personally, I think that's where, a lot of Indians struggle. And I do. I think that's the biggest one for me. And of course, there's like, even though like the visas here are like super good in terms of giving people opportunity. But then if you just compare somebody who's in India versus America, they would have to go through that paperwork, right? That's an additional step. So a lot of people do choose to not make that move sometimes because of that additional paperwork. Like they're like, oh, we'll have to keep doing paperwork like all our lives till we're citizens, or maybe never we're citizens. So we'll have to do it like all our lives. So um yeah, that's definitely like tiresome, but necessary.
Yeah,
I would
well,
say.
a lot of people don't really understand the what foreigners have to go through. See, I know there's the O1 non-immigration visa, which is a short-term
Yes.
work visa. And
Yes.
then there's also the H-1B visa, which is the actual work employer hire foreign workers visa.
Correct. Correct. So, yes. So basically, right now, I think, and again, I'll have to double check the statistics, but my understanding is a lot of immigrants are on these temporary work visas who are not yet green card holders or citizens. And I'll start with the first one that you talked about, the O1 visa. The O1 visa, based on my understanding, is a visa that allows people to not just work for organizations, but it also allows a lot of startup founders from different countries to basically, expand their businesses in America, and they can be business owners while being on the O1 visa. And I think it's a great opportunity because I think it's a dream for a lot of budding entrepreneurs from a lot of different countries to be able to do business in America. And this visa provides, I would say, a very fair route to establish business here. In no means I'm trying to say that it's easy to get an O1 visa. I mean, the criteria to actually get that visa are, I would say, pretty I mean, the standards are really high, and as they should be. And I think it's to say that most people who really have that base for setting up their business or who are really good in their area of work, those are the ones who get this visa. And it has multiple benefits. People can do their own business, they can work for an employer, and transferring this O1 visa is also pretty easy. So I would say it's for a temporary visa, it's a good visa. Then there is the H1B visa. The H1B visa is the visa for specialty occupation. That's the visa that, I was on with my previous employer, and I potentially will be with like the next employer that I'm trying to like work with now. So the H1B visa works also, I would say in a very fair manner where um, the employer has to establish that the employee who they're hiring has the kind of skill set and capabilities that makes them eligible to work in America because they are part of that specialty occupation. And I would say the H-1B visa is more employer driven, where the employer has to establish that relationship. And for the employee has to make sure that, that their resume is tight and they're really that specialized. But besides that, in terms of the actual visa filing, USCIS, which is US's immigration office, puts that responsibility on the employer to actually file for that visa. Like as an immigrant, as an employee, I'm not allowed to file that visa for myself. It has to be the employer filing for the employee. So it's a very interesting setup. It's basically a visa where the employer roots for the employee and says, hey, I really want this employee and I want to sponsor this visa. An O1 visa, I think, is mostly sponsored by an employee themselves. I'm not aware if it's something that can be sponsored by an employer, but in my personal experience, I only know people who have sponsored O1s for themselves.
And do they ever assist you into actually receiving your green card and being an American citizen?
Like, do the employers, you mean,
Yeah.
assist us?
Yeah. Is there any
Uh,
certain things that they can do in order for you to become
yeah.
a permanent citizen in the United States?
Well, yes, absolutely, yes, they can. And I think it kind of depends because the intent of these visas, the O1, I'm not sure about the O1 because I personally never have dealt with it, but for the H1B, the intent is to not have a permanent citizenship or residence here. That's not the intention of that visa. The intention of that visa is to provide specialized occupation during the duration of that visa. But
Mhm.
then, as there are some people like, who kind of make their lives here and they realize that, oh, I feel like my life is here, like my wife is here, let's say, or my kids are here, or like my husband is here, I've bought a house here. Then some of those people do choose to also become like green card holders. And then that's a separate, I would say, route from the temporary visas. And for the green card, yes, there are employment based green cards. So there are two to three different kinds of employment-based green cards, and of them, a few of them can be sponsored by the employer. Like the employer can sponsor those green cards. So I would say I've seen a lot of my friends actually get their green cards through their employers. It might take a longer time because for people who are coming from India, there's a lot of wait time. But definitely, most of my friends who have green cards are the ones like who actually got it from their employers.
And what are some of the pros and cons when it comes to working in technology here in the United States?
Well, I would say the biggest benefit is really the level of opportunity that a person gets, and for somebody coming from India, it's also the overall like salary and the income. Like it's just I think it like there is more value for that talent here in America in general. Um, and then I would say that in general, cultural diversity also, like being able to have colleagues who are from different kinds of cultures just helps have a diverse set of thoughts and ideas that, is probably going to be hard to get if somebody is in there within their own culture. But definitely, I think when it comes to the challenges, I would say like culture has two aspects. One is like enjoying the culture, but also the second is like being accepted. Sometimes it can be hard to like be a cultural fit in the team, right? Understand the working style of the team. So there needs to be like this additional step that needs to be taken to like adjust more culturally in the team. Um, and then I would say the other part is like just in general having social circles. Like I think growing up in India, most of my friends would be from actually my office because I would spend so much time working in the office. But here, not necessarily, right? Here, people have different kinds of boundaries, which I think is great, but it kind of like uh, it kind of made me grow in a manner that I had to learn those boundaries and I had to also keep them so that I fit here. So it's definitely, I would say, a challenge in a way that there is this element of adjustment, adjusting the mindset, adjusting the culture, learning like what's appropriate, learning how to mingle, like how not to offend somebody. I think that definitely there are those elements.
And then what are some of the things that people need to know if they want to break into computer technology?
Well, I would say that the first thing is really having a passion for it. Like, honestly, I know there is this focus on getting education, formal education, but I personally think that there is just so much out there in terms of reading, in terms of like, just being curious about what's out there in terms of technology that you can win half the battle by just being on top of the current trends or having certain role models even. Like if you have that one or two like role models who you follow, I think that helps a lot. The second thing is, well, the second part about like actually cracking into technology is really finding your own like niche. Like where do you want to put that impact? Because I think sometimes some people are more kind of involved with the aspect of the innovation. But I think ultimately what makes it a success is the innovation with the impact of the innovation, right? So I can be super innovative about a particular thing, but the impact might not be that huge in general. So I would say there's a balance between innovation, passion, and like impact. Like if somebody's able to balance all three and also finding the right mentors, it's so important. Like and it's so and like I think that's one of the biggest things that helped me honestly, like having the right mentor who guided me through the process and helped answer some of my questions.
Well, you always need somebody to turn to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, and what are some of the everyday things that surprised you? Because I've seen these videos on YouTube, and it's like a lot of nothing. They're eating parfaits on a roof, doing a lot of gibberish, long, silly stuff. Like, what is actually some real stuff that you did not know you needed to do, but you have to do them now?
In terms of like the actual job or like getting
In terms of the job and life
well,
when
obviously,
it
yeah,
when it
that's
comes to working technology.
absolutely, I think think what nobody tells us is that there is not a single right way. There's absolutely no framework. Like knowing a particular technology, for an example, sometimes I think I used to feel like I know how to do this particular modeling, or I'm like such a great person, like in terms of creating workbooks and presentations. And I thought that should be good enough, right? Like I have so many things and it should work for me. And then there were times when it did not work for me. And I was like, what's going on? Like I thought this is the blueprint to, like, getting the best opportunity in technology, but seems like this is not. I think what people don't tell us is that there is no blueprint. It's about consistent effort and keeping that passion up even when there are 10,000 failures. And I think it just in general, even life is like that, right? We get just sometimes I just have come to realize that success literally comes after rejection. And when I say rejection, I mean maybe 100 and 1,000 kind of cases of rejection. And then there's one success. And that's what I live my life based off on now. And it kind of helps me just get through. Of
That sounds pretty good, actually.
course.
So, was there anything else that you had that you wanted to say?
No, actually, thank you so much for, taking my thoughts on these topics. I'm always so happy. Like it just gives me a lot of peace discussing about technology and about just in general, like how to get around some of the stuff around, culture and immigration. I was curious about even your journey. I know we had a brief discussion before, and you mentioned that you've had this whole career in law enforcement, which is like for me coming from India, that's like so exciting. So just I'm very curious to learn about like how your journey has been, how your experience has been in law enforcement, and what excited you to kind of look into technology.
Well, what really got me in technology was I was always fascinated with technology, but I kind of turned away from it because I was in law enforcement. Like my degrees are criminal justice and psychology. And then what really sparked it getting back into technology was actually me buying a thing called a Steam Deck. I don't know if you know what a Steam Deck is. It's a handheld gaming system, but it doubles as a computer. So it's basically holding like a handheld.
Hmm.
It's so stupid. It's so silly. so like so you could turn it into a desktop.
Okay.
There's a thing that's you transform it. You can turn it in desktop mode, which puts it in Linux.
Hmm.
And I remembered, and it's so silly, so dumb. So somehow when I first did it, I put it into Linux and I was like, well shit, how do I do this? The hell did I do? And then I had to Google it. And I Googled it and I kind of figured out how to go back into like game mode where you can actually go back to playing games.
Hmm.
But that was like one of the shocks, one of the surprises. And then before that, I actually went to South by Southwest here in Austin.
Hmm.
And I've always educating myself. Like I know people shun about reading books, but I still enjoy reading books. Like I still really enjoy it. And I've gone to one of my goals is to have my own TEDx. Is to
Wow.
actually be on TED. That is one of my goals. And I remember I was one of the finalists for the state of Texas. But it was like,
Wow.
well, yeah, I was like, I gave this rah-rah speech, recorded it, and then you send it to them. And for the state of Texas, every division has their own TEDx. They have their own personal one. Even though I wasn't one of the people that made it to like the top 25, but just for the fact that I made it to the top 100 when it came to picking, because corrections is one of them. Like the highway gets everybody gets their own TEDx by one representative,
Got it.
and you can look it up, and it's about every year or so you'll
Yeah,
see somebody from TDCJ on TEDx.
that's so exciting. I did not know that.
And that's and then so I started learning IT technology,
Mm.
and then I have one of my old laptops, and it broke. And
Hmm.
I'm like, well, I'm a man. I could fix this. And so, like a man, I opened it up
Wow.
and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So- and this was like the final step that really got me into to learning, getting into learning technology.
Got it.
And then I got with one of my nerd friends, and my nerd friend took my laptop and he laughed at me. He laughed at me because I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing. Matter of fact, it's only been about 2.5 years, maybe 3 years since I've actually been in since I made the transition from law enforcement to actual computer technology. It hasn't even been that long.
Wow.
But I like to take a mindset of actually from Arnold Schwarzenegger, if you can believe it.
Wow.
So Arnold Schwarzenegger gave a speech, and in that speech was if you take 1 hour a day
Okay.
to learn something, that's
Hmm.
365 hours in a year of you investing time into learning something.
That's a lot of hours.
It is. And that's one of the things that I've personally taken in amongst all the stuff. Like, you have all these fools and they listen to all these motivational speeches, but that's all they're doing is listening so they can get hyped. They're not actually listening to improve themselves. And that's one of the speeches that I heard that actually got me motivated into getting into IT technology.
Got it. That's very fascinating how your journey started with gaming and then trying to fix a laptop and then your general curiosity. Um,
And then ever since then, a lot of people laugh when I tell them that I got my certifications through Coursera. I got my Google IT technology certification through Coursera, and then I got my Amton with Python through Coursera also. And now I'm fixing to get into cybersecurity because
mhm.
Google created their own cybersecurity class. And I know they work because I seem to keep failing at interviews. Either they don't offer me enough for me to accept the job, or I kind of just bomb the interview and insult my interviewer.
I mean, it's for me, it's so fascinating that you said that people would sometimes laugh that you got the courses done through Coursera, but why? I think Coursera is such a great platform to learn from.
Well, what is so? Let me explain that. I had applied for a computer technology position
Uh-huh.
with the state of Texas,
Hmm.
and then I we can call actually the people for the hiring for the state of Texas. We can call them and be like, "Hey, I would like you to look at my resume. I'm a real estate employee. All you're going to do is transfer me from law enforcement to law enforcement technology."
Hmm.
Well, they were like, "Well, you don't have a degree. You have these certifications."
Hmm.
It wasn't until Amazon called the state of Texas and wanted a reference is when like, well, Mr. Valderramos, I think we'll give you an interview.
Wow.
It wasn't until Amazon gave me a call and asked for references and so forth when they were willing to give me an interview. It's when they took my certification serious.
Wow. That's that's a very interesting journey. And I think that kind of brings me to my next question that how has your experience been overall after you've moved to technology? What are maybe some of the similarities or differences that you see between law enforcement and, and technology?
Uh, it's it's been pretty it's been pretty shocking for me, to be honest.
Okay.
It's been pretty shocking because like I am older. And what I know now, what I didn't know like 3 years ago, is these companies want younger. They want younger people.
Hmm.
And I'll even give you a story. So I think I already gave you the story, but I'm gonna put it on here and we're gonna
Sure.
publish it. So I had an interview with Google and I made it wasn't even a half-assed resume. It's just not like I've only had I've only worked for the state of Texas. That's it.
Hmm.
I don't jump job from job. I'm not one of those jumpers where they're just like, they get the job and then they're applying for something else so they can get higher pay.
Hmm.
I didn't do any of that. I've
Right.
only had one job, and it was like 16 years when I put the application. So I was like 16 years of service, sergeant, supervisor, my law enforcement, criminal justice, psychology, all the and printouts and that because I don't know how to make a proper resume because I've never had to make a resume. Like it never bothered me to like maybe I should invest some time into like defining all these things I do other than just putting what I do. But they
Right.
wanted like more detail. So this little 20-year-old was like, "Hey, your resume looks pretty bland. Can you explain what your resume is to me?" And I'm like, "Well, that's what an actual career looks like."
Hmm.
And he was just horrified that I would tell him that that's what a career looks like. You see, it's like certifications, degrees, law enforcement, sergeant, supervisor, da 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 da. That's what it looks like to have a
Yeah.
career in one place.
Yeah.
Well, all of my friends were like, "Well, you just insulted the interviewer by telling them that," and blah blah blah. Well, I didn't get the job.
I definitely think that based on your experience, that there are some areas in tech that are a little bit more open to people who are passionate versus that they are a little bit open to like people who have more experience in the same area. So it sounds like you had this experience with probably a place where they probably wanted a little bit more experience, right? Um,
Maybe.
but honestly, I think passion will take you a long, long way.
And then I actually got an internship. I had an internship at a startup company.
Oh, congratulations! How did that go?
It went pretty well. Like was they had talked to me. I was there for a few months because I
Hmm.
wanted to. I even went as far as like they were a startup. They didn't have a lot of money, and they
Right.
were telling me, "Well, Mr. Valderramos, it costs money to have interns." And I'm like, "Well, how much does it cost? Like, I could just pay. Like, what about if I just like made sure I didn't cost anything to do an internship because I need experience. Like, I would like
Experience.
And they're all like, so you're telling me that you're willing to pay to become an intern?" Well, like, well, yeah, but I need it on my time, not on your time. Like, I'm 2 years away from retiring, and I
Mhm.
certainly don't want to quit just so that I can be an intern because I have
Makes
to
sense.
I have to pay bills.
Right.
They're like, "Well, that's so you really want it that bad?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I would like it. I would like the opportunity." So they gave it to me because I was willing to pay for the internship. So the business does not lose money. And then while I was there, I was picking up mail. I was doing all the little things that they didn't want to do because they're like basically a startup computer company, and also they do gaming. So they're developing
Got it.
video games. They're doing like multiple different companies or multiple different things
Mhm.
within that company.
Got it.
So I spent at least 1 or 2 hours like dealing with foreigners, dealing with I'm not going to say woke because like I view things differently since I've lived in Austin.
Mhm.
Like people have a different lifestyle.
Right.
For you to be in the tech, you have to want to live that certain lifestyle or you risk getting alienated.
That is so true. That is, I agree. I agree. And, kudos to you for, really taking on that kind of responsibility. I think, with the kind of position that you are in law enforcement, like you said, I think you're very high up, and it just shows that how flexible you are. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah, and then they just wanted to first they wanted to hear stories about prison. They wanted to hear stories about prison. And then I would
That's
have one of
funny.
Yeah, I would be telling them about this and that, and then they want one of them called my bluff. Like they couldn't believe that I was working at a prison and doing this on my days off. So they wanted to see my gear. So I just happened to have it in my car.
Okay.
No, I didn't have any weapons or anything. I didn't have none of that. It's just and so I took out my gear and I just put it on his desk. And I was like, "Here you go. You want to see it? Like you want to know it's real? Like everything I'm telling you, I'm doing."
Wow. I mean, definitely I think I've seen so many people transition from other areas to technology, but never seen someone in law enforcement like so respected, like been there for so many years, try to be in technology. So you're definitely a very unique, like, kind of case in terms of your passion for technology.
Well, I also think it's an ability to start at the bottom. I think a lot of people who are going from not from law enforcement to tech, but if they're going from one thing they've been doing all their life, they expect a certain amount of pay. They expect, I have like
Very
20 and
true.
it doesn't work that way in real life.
Yeah.
Like I full well know that I may in fact have to start at the bottom,
plus
which
one five
I'm
one two
fine.
eight five five one.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I was like, I full well know that I'm gonna start at the bottom, but
Mhm.
I'm also going to have my retirement check. So that's gonna balance out everything.
That's a very good mindset to have. I think very few people have the kind of mindset that you have. Very practical, very grounded.
But I was already doing like the bottom of the barrel stuff. And I really wasn't even complaining because it's not life or death here. Like
True.
me picking up their mail, like they had stuff to do and they didn't want to do it. So they told me to do it. And I'm like, let me have it. I'll do it. What are you doing? It's like, oh, you need me to go take this there? I'm like, well, that's part of my job, even though it's free. It's something that's just you gotta work up.
Well, that's yeah. You have the kind of like flexibility that a lot of people don't have, and I'm sure that will take you a very, very long way. And I'm sure that has taken you a very long way. Like you said, you've grown in your role in law enforcement,
Well, I mean,
and
I also have this mindset of like when I want to flex, I will flex. It's very easy. Like I don't have to do that. Like
yeah,
I don't think
you don't
people
even
don't
need a
understand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like people
badge.
don't understand that I can flex when I want to flex. Like I don't need to. It's not a thing for me. Like it's not even humbling when they get me to do like the male stuff because like I'm an intern. That's just what it is. You do intern stuff. Like and but also at the same time when they called me into the office, this is the story when they let me go. I was actually the first one that they let go because they knew I already had a job. So they called me in and they were like, they actually never really called me Javier until that one time when they're trying to like they had like this
Like a more
HR rep.
formal conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They had this HR rep on the phone because they were expecting like the worst. And the economy's going bad. Like there's a lot of layoffs happening in the tech world right now, which happens for them. They were laying off, I think they said they were laying off like 5 people of the 30 people that they had on their team. And they were laying off like the 3 interns, 2 of the interns. I don't know what the hell they were gonna do, but I knew what I was doing because I just went back to doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hard time. It's a very hard time.
Hmm. And
But
then ever since then, I was offered like a basic job, which they only paid like 40,000, and I'm like, I'm not going to quit my job to go make $40,000 for you.
yeah, that smart move.
No, no, it's not smart at all. But yeah, that's kind of like the basic side of me when it comes to like technology and so forth, and a little bit of the story that comes with me. And so, did you have anything you want to say before we get off?
No, I think this was helpful to know. I didn't really know about the internship experience. It was very interesting. I think, yeah, I want to wish you the best for, your career in technology, and thank you again for having me.
Oh, well, thank you. And if we want anything that you want to put on, we'll have links and descriptions and everything. If you want to send it to me, we'll put it down there for links and descriptions.
Sure. All right.